And we'd like to bring up some of the participants in the film. We have here, we'd like to ask up Lydia Saltzman, Jimmy Crosthwait, Thom Wilson, and Hovey Burgess.
I'm seeing this man for the first time in 50 years. This is the acrobat, the unicyclist, the fire eater, who charmed the people night after night after night. Wow, what a thrill to think we did all that.
We did. It was really incredible.
We all have one.
All right.
So thank you for that really wonderful piece of New York nostalgia. How did you come to make this film?
Well, I want to point out my friend John. John, can you raise your hand? Is he here? John Bloom? I'm not seeing him. Okay. Growing up, I knew that my friend John's father was one of the minority investors in the club. So we sort of knew about the club as teenagers, but we were too young to go, so we didn't really have the experience. And then many years later, I went to visit my friend John's father, and in his assisted living place was a poster for the Electric Circus. And I started to ask him about it, and he just started to talk about it, and I thought, this is an amazing piece of history that has been forgotten. I never went there. I knew about it, but I never went there. So that was kind of the spark. I thought, if this is so meaningful to him that he has a poster hanging in his room, we need to explore this more fully. And that was really just the spark. It just seemed like a great story to tell.
So your previous film was Tresoros, The Lost Jews of Castorios?
That's correct. And where's Larry Russo? There he is, Larry Russo. So that Larry Russo over there, cousin Larry, we made that film together.
Wonderful.
Tresoros.
Complete departure themes from
Yeah,
Jews and Orthodox Christians in the lakeside and Greece to
After telling a Holocaust story, I decided it was time to do something maybe a little more fun.
Well, we got the real deal up here. Did anybody here recognize yourself in any of the footage?
I sure did.
That's fantastic. Does anyone care to share a favorite memory of your time at the circus? Special nights that stood out?
Well, there were many, many moments that were quite wonderful, but for myself personally, I remember a night I was up in one of the projection booths and just sort of watching the fellas doing the liquid projections, and all of a sudden this radiant woman peeks her head and then steps inside, very enthusiastic and curious as to what we were up to. And then I realized that was Greta goddamn Garbo. I just was dumbfounded that she was there. I guess she would have been about 65, 67 years old at the time. Her hair was solid white and kind of silver, but the lights from the projectors were playing off and all around her, and she was just truly angelic. That was my fondest memory. How I came to get to the Electric Circus was because of this woman here, Lydia Saltzman. She had been with a friend of mine, Chris Wimmer, in Memphis, Tennessee for some time, and they sort of split up. Lydia came to New York. Chris came to Chicago, where I was at the time, working on a puppet show that I called I Am Dode. And he helped me build some of the props, and we put this show together, and I went around Chicago trying to find a place to book it, and nothing was gelling. And then Lydia read an article, a little ad, I guess, in the Village Voice that said hippie puppet show wanted. And she called, and Chris and I drove from Chicago to New York here, and had something of a Cheech and Chong moment. The first time we came through the Holland Tunnel into Manhattan, I was driving my Volkswagen bus full of puppet equipment, and Chris and I had been smoking hash from about Chicago to New York, and I get stopped by a cop who says, as I open my little window on the Volkswagen bus, and hash smoke is wafting out the window, he says, "Do you realize you're going the wrong way on a one-way street?" And I said, "No, I didn't realize that." And he went, "Turn it around, whatever." And that was my first moments in Manhattan. Another memorable moment.
How about you, Lydia?
You just made me remember something, that when we worked at the circus, everybody was having a good time. All the patrons were having a wonderful time. The acts were having a good time. And I was sitting up in a little room painting people. And so I was sort of isolated from most of what was going on most of the time. And one evening, I met Wavy Gravy. And so I said to Chris, "Let's take him out to dinner." So Chris said, "Okay, let's take him out to dinner." So I went to Wavy Gravy. I said, "Do you want to go out to dinner with us?" And he said, "Sure." So he went to dinner with us. And then when we were finished eating, we had a wonderful meal. We had a wonderful talk. And then he said, "Now I'm going to take you out to dinner." And we went to another restaurant. And we had another dinner. And then he took us to Gregory Corso's loft, where we met Gregory Corso. And that was like, for me at the time, it was a shocking and wonderful evening. I will never forget it. It was really cool.
Thank you. Well, there were so many memorable experiences there. I'm not sure I was always having fun, because I had to be wearing stilts or have fire torches ready to light, a unicycle ready to ride, and I had to do it on a particular record. Whenever the disc jockey played that record, I had to get out onto the dance floor and do my act. So I didn't really I've got to enjoy the bands and stuff a lot more tonight watching the film. I was just like, I would have missed my entrances probably if I'd been paying attention. Although I have to say that you were always very free. I hung out where you were painting faces a lot, and that was very enjoyable. It was kind of a thing. I wasn't exactly a Electric Circus goer, but I worked there for quite a long time. My first experience was with Jerry Brandt. I was teaching at New York University, and as was Mort Subotnick and Martin. Tony Martin. And we had the same students. So Mort knew that Judy Finelli was learning to juggle from me, and he suggested that she audition for Jerry Brandt. So she did. And Jerry Brandt didn't hire her. And she came to me and said, "Jerry Brandt didn't hire me." And I said, "Well, okay, I'll go audition." So I went and auditioned, and he hired me right on the spot. And I don't think Judy has ever forgiven me for that. But I also met a lot of people. I mean, the Chambers, all these people were so wonderful to meet, not the least of which would be Larry Pizzoni, who's here tonight, and his daughter, Gypsy Snyder's also here. And he was a gorilla. And I now have a thing about polar bears, just as Larry used to have a thing about gorillas. I dress up like a polar bear and foot juggle because I'm no longer able to ride a unicycle or walk on stilts and juggle with my hands effectively. But I've learned to foot juggle, so I lie on my back and I spin a cylinder on my feet. So that's my what I'm doing now. But Larry was, he had been a laborer at the Electric Circus, and he was the follow spot operator. And I told him it's very important when I go out on that dance floor, hit me with a light, because it's just crowded with dancers, and I'm supposed to ride a unicycle, a little circle. So I would balance the unicycle on my chin, and then people would back away. And that made a little circle for me to perform in. And then I would juggle clubs, and finally I would get up on the unicycle and juggle the clubs on the unicycle. And Larry was so artistic. He would bring the follow spot down in on my ankle as I'm going up on the unicycle, and then open up again like that. Eventually became the director of the circus, and eventually had his own circus. And we've stayed connected for a very long time. And that, if you later have questions for me, but I'm going to turn it over to a guy I haven't seen in 50 years.
Nor have I seen Lydia Saltzman in 50 years. Hello, Lydia. She worked at the top of the stairs in the little room painting figures on people. Here's a story that is one for the books, Larry. As Larry ran the show, Larry Pizzoni ran the show, I pretty much ran the operation for 2 years. I dealt with the box office and made the deposits at night and made sure the performers had the things they needed to perform, the lights and the doors unlocked, etc. Stan Freeman made a deal with the police at the 8th Precinct to take me to the bank to make the night deposits because I was carrying so much money in the East Village. Now, the East Village then was not Disneyland like it is now. It was Beirut, you see. The whole place looked like one big crime scene. So if you're carrying $5,000 under your coat, you better be ready to deal with that. The one night, there was a snowstorm, and the police didn't come. They don't tell you why they're not coming. They had other things to do. They didn't come. So I decided to walk to the bank 3 blocks away, down 8th Street in the snowstorm. Everything was okay until I got to the Cube at New York University, the Cube that's pushed around. A car comes around the block a couple of times, and it stops. There's no other traffic. It's 4:30 in the morning in the East Village. The car stops. Someone gets out of the car and walks toward me. Now, just at that moment, walks toward me. That's trouble. That's trouble. Just at that moment, Freddie Alexander, the clown, who you saw tonight, the clown. He's not dressed as a clown now. He's got these colors on that identify him as a Hell's Angel. Comes over to, between the two of us, this kid who I recognized from hanging out at these kids hung out night after night. He walks over to me, but Freddie Alexander drives between us on the sidewalk and knocks this kid out right in front of me, right? He said, and don't you ever come back here. So that was, when Freddie drove off, I wanted to give him the $10 that I had saved for the police. But he drove off. Like you said, this was some group of people. For whatever reason, I mean, they all played the parts they were given. And it was a great group of people. It's good to see you all again. And that story about Freddie Alexander, I'll never forget. Never forget.
While we're talking about Sandy Alexander, I'd like to tell you a wonderful story. Somebody called me and asked me if I would go to one of the local hospitals, I think it was Columbia Presbyterian, and paint the faces and little casts of the children in the children's ward, some children that were very seriously ill. So they said, do you know a clown that can come with you? And I said, oh yes, I know one. So I said to Sandy, will you go to paint with me and entertain the children? And he said, absolutely. So he went on his motorcycle and I went on the train. We get to the hospital and one nurse took him in one direction and another nurse took me in another direction. And I'm painting quietly, painting the children, and they're very happy. And all of a sudden I hear, "No, no, you can't do that." And I look out in the hall, and here goes Sandy running down the hallway, being chased by 2 or 3 nurses. And what had happened was that he was giving candy to all the post-operative children. And they literally had to chase him out of the building. The children were hysterical, and it was a wonderful afternoon.
Sandy, Fred or Sandy, he originally was Fred. Our careers crossed many times. We both had been catchers in flying trapeze acts, and I met him when we were both studying acting at the Pasadena Playhouse College of Theater Arts. I did not spend 5 years in the Marine Corps with him, however, but then we both show up at the Electric Circus. I was there first, but he then shows up. And then when he becomes president of the Hells Angels, he's living a third of a block away from me. And unfortunately, I think he passed away about 2007, but he was an amazing character.
I'd much rather that they tell stories than me.
Well, was there anything memorable, Larry, that, obviously there are tons of stories here. Maybe this should have been a mini-series. But is there anything memorable you want to share with us that was on the cutting room floor?
Oh, wow. I mean, we originally had about a 2.5-hour cut, so there were plenty of things that was heartbreaking, but we had to put them on the cutting room floor. One story that I'm trying to think. There's so many pieces that I wanted to put in, but the great Manzini actually told us a story that he was performing on New Year's Eve, and he was a little drunk, even though you weren't supposed to be drinking in the Electric Circus, but he was a little drunk, and they asked him, "Can you go on again?" He had already gone on, he went on again, and he was doing some sort of a fire-breathing thing, and because he was drunk, he spilled some of the alcohol on himself. Now, the song that was playing was a song by The Crazy World of Arthur Brown called Fire. So the name of the song was Fire that he performed. Do you guys remember this?
Oh, sure.
Okay. And so that night, he was drunk, he spilled some of the alcohol on himself, and he actually got lit on fire. And then people had drinks, so they put him out with their drinks, they put the fire out on the great Manzini by throwing drinks at him. Anyway, that was a fun story, but we just couldn't get it in there.
There's a scene that I have to share with everyone, Larry. It involves this man, Hovey Burgess. You have to picture this scene. He's balancing a unicycle on his chin in the middle of a packed ballroom on a hot, sweaty night with a lot of maniacs around him. This is the scene. I mean, to do something like that is, talk about thrilling. I mean, it was quite something to see it in the middle of that packed, sweaty ballroom. A little circle of light surrounding him, so the people would perform in the perimeter, and that was it. Who here can do that?
Are there any questions for either Larry or any of the participants? Let's see right here.
Great presentation.
Rock and roll music.
By trade, I'm in the concert industry, so I kind of pride myself on knowing venues that don't exist anymore, different concert events, etc., etc. I've told a couple people over the course of the night, I really just found out about the Electric Circus a couple of years ago, and I was astounded that this place existed in a neighborhood that I had come in and out of, buildings that I passed a zillion times. So now, one of the reasons why I was excited to come tonight was by just learning about this a couple of years ago, finding out that there was enough footage and content for you to make a documentary. I was already intrigued. How hard was it for you to find stock footage, archival, ads, how hard was it to find content on which to build
Well, luckily, early on, we found out that there was a Canadian documentary that was produced in 1967 that aired on Canadian television because Stan Freeman came from Canada. So they sent a crew down here. So that was kind of the beginning of kind of a solid piece of archive that we could tap into. And I think we only ended up using about 3 or 4 minutes of that documentary. Really amazing. I wish I could have worked in more, but we used those 4 minutes that were kind of core. Which you saw Jerry Brandt talking about the parade. That was pulled from that Canadian documentary. So that was kind of the beginning of the archival search. It took years to find some of these things. I mean, I had multiple archival researchers that were looking for content. Countless people sort of wanted to help out. So I did have professional archival researchers help with that, including an archival researcher that specialized in European content. So like the Chambers Brothers clip was from German television. And that came through one of these archival researchers. An incredible clip. And by the way, the light show was done by Josh White, who did the Joshua Light Show at the Fillmore East. So that was just a really fantastic find. One of the other amazing finds was that one of Stan's wives had a plastic tub that had been sitting in an archive in a storage unit for 40 plus years that had original film that was used in the light show. Now they didn't know what was on these reels. We ended up transferring all of it. But that, you know, that adds a kind of authenticity to the film that it wouldn't have. So we transferred all this original archival footage, mostly 16 millimeter. Also, within that treasure trove of footage, Sly and the Family Stone live in the Electric Circus. We didn't have any sound. Somebody lost the sound, which is crazy because you actually see the slate in the film. So we know that they were recording sound, but we don't know where the sound went. So we had to create that music video of I Want to Take You Higher. But, you know, that just blew our minds. Shot on 35 millimeter film and 16 millimeter film. So we got very lucky about certain things. You know, like, I'm going to tell a very quick thing, which sort of spoke to me about why I need to do this. I sat in ABC News Source, I guess is the name of that archive. And we asked them, can you just show us some running footage of the East Village during 1967, 68? So the archival researcher and I sat in a booth, and they said, here's some reels you can look at. Within 5 minutes, that Electric Circus van drove by the camera. He looked at me and said, you are the luckiest person ever to find that little piece of footage. So that's why we sort of did a freeze frame on it, because it wasn't a very long clip. But we had, there's countless examples of the archival luck and just, you know, it's one of the advantages of it taking this long. It took us a very long time to make the film, but ultimately things came to us because it took such a long time.
You're the archaeologist of the Electric Circus, Larry.
I know that way.
I know what you started with. Nothing. He had 2 phone numbers.
Yeah.
When he started. Mine and someone else's.
Yeah.
All of this is his digging up. He's the archaeologist of the Electric Circus. He found things that we didn't even know existed. And I had seen almost everything I thought that was part of the Electric Circus memorabilia through the years. Took him 8 years to do this, right? He found everything, thin trash cans in back. We went to find the footage of one of them. We found some collector's library in London.
Right. Well,
so
one of the pieces that we were very lucky about is I talked to an archival researcher, and he said, I was just about to put this piece of film on eBay. It's a commercial, I think, because doesn't have any titles on it, but it's a commercial for the Electric Circus.
Wow.
We used every last frame of that because it was an unbelievable find. But the guy was about to sell it on eBay, so luckily I caught him in time before he sold it to somebody who didn't know what it was. By the way, Thom was the first interview that I did.
Oh, that's right.
And things sort of opened up from there because Thom was in touch with a lot of the people, right? You were in touch with many, many people.
Sure.
So he was the pathway to a lot of other interviews.
Well, the calls came to me through the years.
Right.
Also.
Right,
So-
people came to you because you knew everybody.
Yes, indeed, indeed. So, and they still came 30 and 40 and 50 years after the doors closed. People were still interested in this thing called the Electric Circus. I can't explain it, but I took the calls, and luckily I took your call 8 years ago,
Right?
and you saw what was on the screen today. I mean, that's quite something. Calling someone and asking to do a story about a place 50 years old. It looks threadbare to us today because we're standing on the shoulders of so much of this. Every place on the corner has a nightclub with loud sound and rock and roll music that looks like the Electric Circus. It might not be called the Electric Circus, but this was the first place with big sound, big light, big budget, seminal.
Did you know that at the time? Did you have a feeling of it being groundbreaking at the time?
No. We just got together for a good time. It was wonderful to work there. Sam Freeman
It was
and
a
Jerry
job.
Brandt.
It was a job. Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
no, we
so
didn't know
it was
that.
a job.
Hey, Lydia, can you just talk about the different people that you painted?
Oh, okay. Let's see. First of all, it's a very intimate thing when you're putting hands on people. And it was so interesting.
You got to hold the mic near your
Oh,
mouth.
I'm sorry. It was so interesting to me how people were so willing to come into this little room and let me just paint them. Their little faces, their backs, their arms, their legs, their feet. And there were a lot of celebrities that passed through, and my most favorite celebrity that came there was Shelley Winters. And she said, this is a really wonderful place, but it's really too loud for me. Can I hide out here with you? So I said, please do, And so she stayed with me, and at the end she said, she wanted to tip me. I gave her a little paint on her arm, and she wanted to tip me, and I said, no, I don't want anything from you. She said, well, can I give you an autograph? And I said, yes, sure. So she gave me her autograph, which I still have to this day. Yeah. I can't tell you, I can't even remember who all came, but it was exciting. And it was a beginning for me to understand a lot. I was 24 at the time, I'm 80 now. And it was an interesting exercise for me in learning intimacy with other people. And because I talked to other people, I talked to the young people. Sometimes they would cry and tell me their problems while I was painting them. Other times they would pass out or throw up on the floor. I mean, it was a wonderful experience that I am sort of forgetting now because I'm getting so old. So thank you so much for making me recall it.
Do you have some other stories, Jimmy?
I have, for a couple of months after the initial opening of the Electric Circus, they didn't have the little room up off the balcony ready for me to do my puppet shows in. Eventually I did, and the little room was covered in AstroTurf, as was the entire Electric Circus, except for the dance floor. And so in that 2-month period while we were waiting for the little room to get ready, I was on salary, so I had to do something. And twice a night, the cable that ran from the balcony down to the pedestal, that glass pedestal, which in the end got blown to hell, I would be in a kind of zip line thing, with straps on my wrists. And I was in my clown get-up with a top hat filled with confetti. And Larry, the wonderful lighting expert, would hit the spot up on the balcony, and I would come down the wire, and someone would pull the cable slack so the incline wasn't as great. And I would come down and stop about midway, having showered the room with confetti when they hit the strobe lights, and then I would just be like a raw nerve ends, sort of trying to get to the end of the cable. And I would finally make it to that pedestal where Chris Wimmer, who happens to be about 6'6", and Chris, stand up and let them see how tall you are. He would pick me up, put me on his shoulders, and carry me off. And I learned later that there was an interview with Jimi Hendrix in Rolling Stone where they asked Jimmy, what was your favorite part of your American tour? And he said, a little guy in a yellow clown suit coming down a wire at the Electric Circus. That was another wonderful moment in memory.
And all this to pounding rock and roll music. Pounding. And it was of such quality that you didn't think it was loud. That's why we're like this tonight. Absolutely, absolutely. We had the biggest speakers in town. The biggest cars. Hidden behind the circus tent, so you didn't see anything. You just heard the sound. You could actually feel the sound. The quality was so high. Yes. So it was really quite something to come into see these performances, to set to this rock and roll music was just daring. I mean, aerial artists and trapeze artists and escape artists and clowns and gorillas and whoa, boy, you telling me, I'm telling you. The proof is these people are here, it's midnight. And these people are here interested in what we did 50 years ago. That's really quite something. Thank you.
Well, for all the things that the Electric Circus was, it was the amazing thing to me even today is how it was all integrated. For example, before we opened, we went out and he shot me juggling in the Palisades or something. And so I would perform, and then later I would be up on the screen of the tent performing again. And the whole thing was just so mind-blowing. In fact, I remember the first night they had everything together. Jerry Brandt said, okay, I want to see everything, and get my mind blown. And then he said, after that, I want to make money.
But who told one of you told me a story about how deaf people used to like to come to the club because did you tell me that story?
I can understand why they could feel
Right.
vibrations even if they couldn't hear it.
Right. And also because they like the mime act, right? I mean, no, I'm seriously, that's
The mind spoke to.
right. So they could dance to the beat because the whole place was vibrating, and also they responded to Michael Grando's mime act. Anyway,
But Michael Grando said it best.
I'm sure we have. Good night.
Love you all.
Yes.
Thank you.
is that Larry?
Good night.
Who's leaving? Who just left?
I haven't seen him in 50 years.
You
Oh,
have-
Larry Pizzoni just left. Okay, bye, Larry.
Larry, we thank you for all the beautiful stories. I'm afraid it is midnight. We do have to wrap it up here. But thank you so much for sharing your anecdotes, all you impromptu participants on the panel. And thanks, Larry. Do you have any closing words for the crowd?
No, just that I hope that you felt like you went there because having taken so much time to make this, it really, I feel like I went even though I didn't go. So, what's that, Alex? Well, I interviewed Thom for that was the first interview in California in 2015 in August. So it's over 8 years on and off it took to
My
make
journal
I mean,
has
we
his
didn't
name in
work
it for the first
continuously on
year.
it, obviously, but it took a long time.
Thank you very much.